Altogether honesty, most run a well-known pattern. First lost to time, then rediscovered. Elite individuals are identified and that they come buried with plenty of stuff. Inscriptions and murals make a movie of their lives. Yawn. In 2019, officials announced a tomb that bucked the trend. A year earlier, archaeologists found burials at Saqqara from 2,000 years ago. One among the modest coffins was badly decayed, but curious details survived. At the extent of the person's neck, the coffin's lid was decorated with a painted necklace. Lower down, hieroglyphs normally provided the deceased's name. But when experts tried to read the inscription, it made no sense. There was nothing wrong with their reading skills. The hieroglyphics were an imitation of the important thing and translated into utter nonsense. It's plausible that the artist was illiterate because none of the signs had the right shape. The person also enigmatically painted a blue Anubis on the coffin. Normally, this jackal-headed god is depicted in black. What could this mean? Your guess is nearly as good as ours. The ancient Egyptians had a quirk. The lion was among their most powerful symbols, and yet, just one mummified lion had ever been found. The huge cats aren't a neighborhood of Egypt today, but a short time passed, several prides lounged round the Nile. The royals even kept them as pets. So where were the bodies? After digging through centuries and much of mummies, the mystery endured. There had to be quite just the only lion, since classical writers described the Egyptians mummifying the huge cats. An opportunity came in 2019. An excavation in Saqqara revealed a slew of house cat statues, cobras and crocodile mummies. Then the catacomb produced 5 feline-shaped mummies. To the team's delight, they clothed to be lion cubs. The ancient cubs died once they were 8 months old. Their discovery could clarify why so few lions were embalmed despite being elite symbols. For this reason, one cannot help but wonder why the Egyptians deemed it important to place 5 lion mummies within the same place. Around 3,000 years ago, artists lived near the Valley of the King's necropolis. Their job was to form the royal tombs pretty with murals. Once they were finished a day, the lads and ladies returned to the village of Deir el-Medina. Their spare time creative endeavors wouldn't come to light until 2014. A female mummy from Deir el-Medina sported several tattoos. Thanks to their abundant numbers and sacred theme, she was tagged as a probable priestess. As time glided by, 6 more women, considerably preserved and decorated with tats, were unearthed at Deir el-Medina. In 2019, researchers released their findings, and it changed what we knew about ancient Egyptian tattoos. In the past, scholarly minds had no reason to think that Egyptian tattoos were anything but a rare mark denoting a high station. But the Deir el-Medina women showed that inking was more common among the people than previously believed. While they did play a spiritual role, the tattoos had a contemporary purpose. Divers are exploring Heracleion for about 20 years. This ancient Egyptian city was a busy port, except for some reason, disappeared under the water. The ruins were rediscovered 45 meters, 148 feet, under the Mediterranean. Several artifacts and buildings were catalogued, but in 2019, a world team made the foremost significant find so far: massive stone columns. The monumental chunks probably belonged to the city's main temple, called Amun-Garp. Scanning equipment made the invention possible, beaming images back to scientists without the necessity to shovel through plenty of silt and fish. As a bonus, the scans also found a smaller Greek temple and shipwrecks full of jewelry and coins. The dive also recovered another piece of a ceremonial boat found on another occasion. The sunken city, sometimes called Egypt's Atlantis, was built sometime during the 8th century. It had already produced magnificent architecture, treasures and colossal statues. Since about 95% of Heracleion remains unexplored, the town is sure to deliver more surprises. In 2019, Egyptian authorities invited journalists to a conference. At the meeting, they revealed a spectacular find: 30 pristine coffins. The caskets were crafted and painted 3,000 years ago. Despite this dusty fact, the general condition was remarkable. The decorations were clear and kept their patterns and colors. The corpses came from a necropolis called El Asif, near Luxor. The standard of the wooden coffins and clues about their identity suggested that some were priests. For this reason, the invention soon became referred to as the cachette of the priests. Upon discovery, the group was arranged in 2 layers with 12 caskets stacked on top of the remainder below. They were sealed and untampered with. Perhaps for dramatic effect, 2 coffins were opened during the conference. The mummies appeared well preserved with bandages intact. All told, the cachette contains 2 children, 5 women, and 23 men. Their unlooted state could help researchers determine who exactly they were and why they were buried together. Seamus Blackley is understood together of the creators of Xbox. Few people know that he's also a hardcore amateur Egyptologist and baker. These 2 hobbies recently merged to rediscover an extinct taste. Blackley wanted to munch Egyptian bread and he began to form some. The sole problem was that he needed the yeast used during past. He managed to urge his baker's mitts on 4,500-year-old yeast. The dormant stuff was scraped from cooking pots used during the Old Kingdom. He was assisted by scientists to reawaken the yeast in their laboratories and he was allowed to hold some home. Blackley cultivated the sample for every week, nourishing it with vegetable oil, hand-milled barley and early wheat called einkorn. Eventually, he had a starter, which is analogous to what's wont to make sourdough loaves. The next step was to combine the starter with authentic ingredients. Modern wheat was out since it had been invented long after the yeast went into hibernation. Blackley used ancient grains like einkorn, barley, and kamut. While it baked, he noticed that the scent was sweeter than other bread he previously made up of an equivalent grains and modern yeast. He described the finished look as light and airy, which the aroma and flavor are incredible. Egyptians loved to offer mummies as offerings. Everyday citizens visited their local dealer, usually a priest of some sort, and purchased a little animal or bird. Indeed, birds were so popular that Egyptologists have gathered many preserved avians. Some even had their own tiny coffins. However, the sheer number of bandaged birds prompted the question of supply. The foremost commonly used species was the African Thresciornis aethiopica, but where did the Egyptians get them all? Conventional thought supported the thought that Egypt had ibis farms within the way that we've chicken farms. In 2019, geneticists drew samples from 40 ibis mummies and came to a really different conclusion. Domesticated birds of an equivalent species show similar DNA. The petrified ibises, however, showed enough variation to suggest that they were born wild. In other words, the Egyptians seemingly corralled wild birds to wrap them up as offerings. There's a drag with this, as critics quickly acknowledged. Catching many ibises alone would are on the brink of impossible and also unsustainable. The Egyptians had a gentle supply but seemingly not farmed. The feathery mystery continues. Another announcement in 2019 described the tomb of a woman. Archaeologists shoveled around the productive site of Saqqara once they unearthed a catacomb. It dated back 2,000 years ago when the Romans controlled Egypt. Indeed, the woman buried there wasn't an Egyptian. Her name was Demetria. Greek inscriptions gave her closest relatives names and called her worthy. A carving inside the tomb depicted her during a gorgeous dress while holding grapes. An animal, which was a pet but not clearly defined as any known animal, gazed up at Demetria with its paws on her dress. Several cat-like statues could also not be clearly identified as a selected species. Images of Egyptian gods added to the magnificence of the underground chamber. An inscription below the deities gave the name of one Menelaus and described him as their servant. The Greek title given to elucidate his servitude was Therapeutes, something which is exceptionally rare in any Egyptian context. The term isn't unknown, but experts cannot agree on what a Therapeutes did for his masters or how these servants lived. In 2019, British Library took an artifact out of storage. The general public last saw the tablet within the 1970s, and visitors viewing the exhibition, which highlighted the history of writing, it looked downright modern. Along several lines, a child scrawl copied phrases written by an adult hand. Only it had been not modern. The tablet was 1,800 years old. The Egyptian student was required to repeat 2 pearls of wisdom in Greek. Not only did he learn his letters, but it had been also an exercise of the mind. Rather than copying only characters, the adult's writing warned him of bad friends, which wisdom should be sought from wise men only. The kid was likely male, since education among Egyptians was reserved for the boys of high-status families. This also explained why an Egyptian kid carved Greek into a tablet. Rome ruled his country during this point, and everyone educated people within the Roman world were expected to understand Greek and Latin.